We were creating our characters together for playing the German RPG, The Dark Eye. During character creation, you can pick a wide variety of advantages and disadvantages. Advantages cost you points, while disadvantages give you points. So the more disadvantages you pick, the more advantages you can have. The amount of points each is worth varies. One player who is mute IRL was delighted to find out that muteness is actually a disadvantage in game, so she picked it for her character. It's worth a lot, since being mute in game is actually a huge disadvantage, obviously. The DM said that she can't get points for it, since you're mute anyway. We all laughed because we thought it was a joke, but turns out he was dead serious. It turned into a pretty long and weird argument, and we all ended up deciding not to play with him in the end, and left the creation session. What this DM's reasoning or motive is beyond me, but I am glad that this one was nipped in the bud. Can't say the same for all horror stories, though. I am planning on running a post-apocalyptic campaign with horror elements, so I have some elements I am planning on including to facilitate the horror part, such as a stress system that gives players a stress point every time they witness something unsettling or suffer a bad wound, etc. A little stress can give your characters bonuses, but too much stress can result in your character panicking, something similar to what the Alien RPG does if you've ever played it, but not as punishing as that. I am in the process of gathering players from the game. This guy contacts me and says he is interested in playing, but that he does not like some of the rules that I am planning on implementing. So I ask him which ones, and what his concerns are. And he starts mouthing off on how he used to be a DM, and how my entire system is bad because it takes away the player's agency. Then he starts listing off all the things that he wants to change, and completely gets rid of my stress system, saying that players can just roleplay that instead. So I simply thank him for his interest, but if he does not like anything about the system I'm running, he does not have to play it. I can take his concerns into consideration, but the core rules are not going to be up for debate. Then he sends me this. Just some friendly advice. Then as a former DM, if you don't talk to your players at all and act as a dictator of rules, no one will play it. Being a good DM is understanding when to compromise and understand your players. This guy assumes from a single 5-minute online conversation that I do not want to talk to my players and that I'm a dictator of rules. Gee, thanks for the unsolicited sage advice, master. So I reiterate to him that if he does not like my idea, he does not have to play it. I am sure that there are plenty of other RPG campaigns out there that would better suit him. This is his answer. Okay, Mr. Dictator, DM is not a dictatorship. I tried giving you some friendly advice to save your time, so yeah, I don't need to play. You already fail at organizing. Well, thank you very much, kind stranger, but I am 33 years old. I am pretty sure I can manage my own time just fine, so I pretty much just throw him out at this point. I tell him that I do not want him in my game because he is displaying manipulative and toxic tendencies. This was his last message before I blocked him. Dude, you don't talk to your players. You are stubborn and it's your way or the highway. If it's not your version of the game, you tell people to bugger off. So this guy basically attempted to manipulate me to hijack my game before it even started. Like the OP said, if you don't like a system, don't play it. I don't understand this. I've recently been looking through LFGs for just some games that I can join so I can finally play Dungeons & Dragons as a player. And yeah, if I don't like a system, I don't sign up. Simple as that. But yeah, I guess an alternative approach is to try and force the DM to just completely change the game they're running. I guess you could do that too. I'll start the story off by admitting that I'm not the most experienced DM in the world. I've been a player for about 6 years now and have only DM'd a grand total of 6 sessions, most of which have been one-shots. A group of friends that I DM for have all known each other for over a decade at this point and have been in contact with each other over social media constantly. Several of us are big fans of D&D, and with the release of the Legend of Vox Machina animated series, it got us all reminiscing about playing 5th edition together. It had been a couple of years since we last played as a group, and I volunteered to DM. There were 5 player characters altogether: Fuzzy, Weasel, Rusty, Breeze, and Problem Player. Fuzzy only ever had 1 session of D&D before, and that was 4 years ago, so we all agreed that we'd make a short campaign, comprising of 3 2-hour-long sessions to make it a nice, easy introduction to the game for him. We had a very in-depth session 0 with the entire party over Discord. I explained the premise of the mini-campaign I had in mind, a murder mystery set in a carnival, and that I wanted the overall tone of the game to be a bit quirky, adventure, rom-com style. As I had played with the entire group before, and this was the tone we were all most comfortable with. We were always very into role-playing our characters, so I made sure to provide lots of opportunities for funny inter-party and NPC interactions for them to have fun with. The plan was for this mini-campaign to be a self-contained quest, with the potential to continue into a larger campaign if everyone wanted to do that. I wasn't going to make backstories super relevant in this one quest line, so I made that known. Everyone was on board, everyone rolled up their characters, and I was confident that because we had all been friends for over a decade, that they would synergize as a party. This is where the problem player rose their head. For this story, they shall be known as Blue. I had played several games with Blue before, both as a DM and as a fellow player. They could be loud and a bit domineering as a character, and had a habit of metagaming on occasion, especially in combat, but would always chill out after 20 minutes and end up playing along with the party and genuinely being good fun. This time, Blue was playing a bard and made special note of the fact that they were going to be playing a lawful evil alignment. Now, I've never been too fussed with alignment. I know everyone's opinions differ on its practicality. For me personally, I don't enforce it in my games and never ask players about it, but I think it can be a great jumping off point for learning how to roleplay a character. However, I never really use it as a mechanic in the game, with the exception being if someone is playing a cleric or paladin and goes against their deity's alignment. Blue was adamant about wanting to learn how to roleplay an alignment properly, and sent me a bunch of articles and pages that explain in great detail how to play a lawful evil character properly as proof that they've done their homework? I read through the pages they shared and expressed to them my concerns. The pages were in-depth, clinical, and seemed like they'd be fine references for writing a lawful evil character in, like, a novel, but most of the text seemed like they were encouraging lone wolf or main character behavior, and there was nothing written about how to synergize this playstyle with other players. I warned them that it was completely fine to play a lawful evil character, but I emphasized that they need to be able to work together with the party and be part of a team. They assured me that they would. As you can probably guess, they didn't. The session began. I described the party arriving at this carnival and approaching the ticket vendor. One of our players, Fuzzy, decides to take the lead. He says "good evening" to the vendor and only gets 2 words into his next sentence before he is interrupted by an annoyingly spot-on Skeletor impression. "Yeah, I want to find a tavern so I can get drunk!" exclaimed Blue. I haven't seen He-Man in forever. Excuse my terrible Skeletor impression. My heart immediately sank. There's a beer tent in the carnival if it's ale that you're after," I said, as the vendor. "It's 1 silver to enter if you're here to buy a ticket."
"Yeah, maybe I should just stab you so I don't have to pay. I'm not parting with my money. I'm going to leave and find a tavern in the town."
Now, I was explicitly clear in session 0 that the entire quest was going to take place in the carnival, and I intended it to be a closed setting. Everyone knew this, and consented to it. Blue consented to it, and they were actively trying to move us away from the setting that we agreed upon. One of our other players, Weasel, thankfully stepped in and pacified the now hostile guards, and the party entered the carnival. I'll speedrun through some of the offenses in this singular session. When presented with a plethora of carnival-themed minigames, I set it up so there would be at least 2 minigames suited to each party member's skill sets. The problem player honed in on the dunk tank specifically and spent 40 minutes out of our 2-hour session replaying the game over and over again so they could win prize tickets. I tried to be forceful and say things like, "As you continue your game, the rest of the party move on," but would be quickly interrupted by,
"I rolled a 24. Does that hit?"
and dragged back into describing them hitting the target and the carny being dunked in the water. This happened 3 times before they were satisfied and finally moved on. We ended up wasting so much time that the party never got to play any of the minigames that they were expressingly wanting to try. Throughout the rest of the session, even after the other players had plans on where they wanted to go next, Blue would exclaim that they wanted to go back to the dunk tank and would try to drag the party back there. Blue was punched in the face after he slapped another player character, Breeze. It was an in-character slapping, not the players slapping each other. It was an RP moment that the players were completely okay with. I asked Breeze to make an attack roll, and Blue exclaimed,
"I rolled a 22 athletics check to dodge, so she doesn't hit me."
Rusty and I both told him that's not how that works, and that Breeze's attack roll beats their AC. Now, I don't know if this is some obscure rule that they're referencing, or if this is some homebrew rule from another campaign that Blue is a player in, but it still rubbed me the wrong way. I've talked to them before about how I'd prefer it if they tell me what they plan to do before they roll, but they don't seem to listen. Blue got overly aggressive when arguing with another player about which prizes to exchange their tickets for. They had enough for a single massive novelty plushie, and the choice was between a red dragon or a copper dragon plushie. Blue wanted red, and Rusty, the other player, wanted copper. Rusty tried to put it to a party vote, to which Blue responded by doing what he does best and yelling,
"I rolled a 29 in persuasion,"
before the rest of the party could get a word in. Rusty rolled a 15 to contest them. They got their red dragon plushie and gloated their victory. I was narrating a little mini cutscene. I know not everyone's a big fan of cutscenes in D&D, but my groups always liked them. That was the beginning of the inciting incident that would drive the rest of the quest forward. Blue decided that this was the perfect moment to piece out of the story and just leave the carnival with their prizes. I had to rush past some important steps in my session outline in order for them to not leave that kind of, ruin the tension. Blue spent 10 minutes on their first round combat thinking over which spell to use. I tried pushing them, saying, "Look, we're running out of time before we have to wrap this up. If you don't decide in the next few seconds, I'm gonna skip to the next person." They still didn't decide. I said, "Okay, I'm sorry, but we have to move on. You took too long in your round and missed your opportunity to do anything. Breeze, oh look, you're next in the initiative. What do you want to do?"
"I'm not finished. I'm just reading my spells."
Their tone was so aggressive, and they kept interrupting me when I told them they had to pick up the pace. They ended up just using the dash action instead of casting a spell anyway. I do take some responsibility as the DM for not doing enough to prevent this. Everyone at the table, including myself, is a pretty polite, soft-spoken introvert in the "oh, sorry, you go first" kind of way if two people accidentally speak at the same time. Blue is not like this at all. They have become a booming voice that is rarely below a shout and have a penchant for ignoring other people when they speak so that they can finish their train of thought. Fuzzy, Weasel, and Breeze barely got a chance to speak at all during the session. I tried my hardest to put the spotlight on them so that they can get a chance to shine, but they were always interrupted by Blue, mostly shouting until they wanted to play Dunk Tank minigames again. Rusty was a fantastic player and is one of the more extroverted among us, and she was trying her absolute best to bring the party together as a team and make sure everyone was involved and having fun. It didn't matter though. If Blue wasn't in the spotlight, then Blue would make a fuss and a lot of noise until they dragged the spotlight back onto them. I talked to the rest of the party individually regarding Blue's behavior. I told them as a DM, my experience was made 10 times more stressful, as it felt like I was almost battling this overbearing player character who wanted to do what they wanted and nothing else, and wanted to know how they felt as players. They assured me that they had a good time, somehow, but that Blue being disruptive and hogging all the scenes was kind of unpleasant. I've sent Blue a message regarding this behavior in session, and I'm awaiting a response. I don't want to kick them, as they're my longtime friend, and they've genuinely been a pretty fun person to play with in previous games in spite of a few flaws. I just don't know what's possessed them to act this badly with their new character, and I hope it's something we can fix. Hope this story ends happily. Now, this is where I was going to end it off, but wait, there is more. We have an update. Eyes up, friends. Let's get some resolution. Had a serious conversation with Blue. I outlined very clearly their problematic behavior and was very explicit about banning all inter-party persuasion contests. I still feel unbelievably awful about not stopping it as soon as it was mentioned. Blue was actually very civil and apologetic. They admitted that they're very used to a different playstyle with their main D&D campaign that they've been a player in for over 2 years. From what I understand, that party regularly engages in PvP, consensually, and that it's made up of, let's say, confident individuals who talk over one another to even stand a chance at being heard by the DM. I let them know that that playstyle isn't compatible with what the rest of the party wants, and they apologize and promised me that they do better next session. I'm giving them one more chance, and they seem genuinely sorry and open to do better. We can only wait and see, though. It's not full resolution, but it is some closure on this story, and I'm happy that at the very least, this player was understanding. This is the power of talking to your quote-unquote problem players. A lot of these RPG horror stories result in temper tantrums and quit games, and that might happen. But on the other side of that coin, you could find a story like this, where your player instead decides to try and be better for your game. This is great. I absolutely love this ending and hope that we see more stories like this in RPG horror stories. Sure, this started pretty rough. Blue definitely hogged the spotlight, and yeah, I would be pretty frustrated too. Remember, there's a social contract between DMs and players when it comes to running this game. The DM creates the adventure, and the players decide to play in that adventure. When you play Curse of Strahd, your players can't simply tell you that they're not going to go to Barovia at all. I'm glad, though, that despite these issues, the story may have been actually resolved. Happy to see it. I have been on a decent-sized TTRPG server for a while now. A bunch of my friends, newcomers, and so on get together. We play all sorts of systems. Most people are both players and DMs in their own right. Now, we come to me. I am a gay man. I have mostly played gay male characters in all the games I play. A couple of times a female character, but that's pretty rare. Some people may call this unimaginative and a failure of roleplay. The sexuality of my character doesn't define them. I have run the gambit of human wizards, gnome barbarians, down on his luck bankers, courtiers of all sorts. The reason for this is because I was in the closet for a long time. I essentially roleplayed a straight person for 20 years, and it was miserable for me. It was the worst and most traumatic time of my life. Things have improved, but the prospect of having to do it again gives me panic attacks. When I DM, I can manage it with the NPCs because I detach myself enough from them. They're strangers, they're different people, but a player character is a different story. It's my character, it's my story. In comes this DM. He has run a couple of one-shots in a full campaign. I didn't play in the campaign. He also shared the table with me as a fellow player multiple times. I don't know if I was just oblivious, but he never showed any signs of having a problem with my characters. He announces that he wants to try out a Star Wars system. I'm not too big of a fan of Star Wars, but love to see new systems, so I sign up. We learn character creation and get to work. As you can guess, my character was a gay man, a devil-may-care smuggler. I fill out the character sheet and make a bare-bones backstory. I wanted to get more details off the GM on certain aspects of the world to flesh it out at a later time. A day later, I get a private message from him on Discord. He is asking why I made my character gay again. In the backstory, he had a scorned ex-boyfriend who put a bounty on him. I'm a bit confused by this, since I don't think I need a reason. I counter with, why are your characters always straight? He tried to pivot.
This is about you. Can't you play something different for a change? It's getting stale.
I am getting a bit annoyed, but decide to give in to a degree. Fine, I can change him to a her. Not good enough.
Again, you go around chasing guys. Just make a straight, normal guy for once.
Alarm bells are going off in my head. I want to get out of this conversation right now. I don't care what you think is normal. My character, my choice. If you don't want me to play, just tell me. Say so. He gets antsy, flip-flopping how it's not about me. He wants to help me get better at my roleplay. I'm running games myself and have yet to receive complaints about my many NPC characters. I leave the private messages and go to the server, asking people flat out, do I suck at roleplay? The majority answer is no, and my players compliment my NPCs, especially the villains. There is a bit of confusion as to where this came from, so I put the DM on blast, explaining exactly what happened in the private DMs. A big argument broke out in general, and most of the server turned on DM. He kept arguing back and forth on how
I wasn't homophobic, and this guy is just lazy and wants to live out his sex fantasies.
Our games never go into that. It's fade to black or kisses, nothing crazy. I missed some details because the chat was going so fast that a mod had to lock it. The DM left the server and sent me several choice expletives in the private chat. Was I in the wrong here? No, definitely not. This DM sucks. The question that this OP asked is pretty pertinent. If the DM is always making characters of their same sexual orientation, why is it bad for OP to make characters of their same sexual orientation? And the DM's response is not adequate as a response. He's not trying to help this guy better his roleplay. He's probably just blatantly homophobic, at least based on the information that we have right now. What the DM said was not okay, and this guy had a right to tell the rest of the server about it. When bad crap happens in the DMs like this, you have a right to tell the rest of the group. Hell, I'd argue that you have a responsibility to tell the rest of the group. There should be nothing wrong with playing characters of your same gender and sexual orientation. Nothing really more to be said on that topic. The story is from when I was in college, freshman, second semester. This is important because if you think the people in the story are immature, that's because we were. So I had been in only 2 D&D games before as a player at this point, so I wanted to shoot my shot at being a DM. So I hopped on the group meet in our apartment and made a recruitment post. I had a group of 5 players, but only one in the story is important. I'll call him Grumpy. Grumpy came up to me and told me he was an experienced player who had been playing dozens of games before, but he didn't like that I was going to be running the campaign in 5th edition. He recommended we run Pathfinder, told me how much better and customizable it was over a series of texts filled with links to resources, but I declined. I was new, and tackling a different rulebook I had only looked at twice before felt overwhelming, so I wasn't confident in running anything but 5th edition. He seemed upset about it, but ultimately decided to sign up anyway. Session 0. We're making our characters. There were 2 fresh new players at the table, so we took our time in slowly building out their characters. I am a heavy role player who loves world building, so I informed everyone the campaign would be homebrew in terms of the plot. Grumpy then brought up a question about homebrew races and classes, which I fearfully declined. Grumpy questioned how I could make a homebrew story without homebrew characters and classes, and honestly I didn't have a solid answer for him. He then laughed it off and simply told me he'd be running a min-max hunter build, which I had no idea what that was at the time, so I just kinda let it go. 6 sessions later, and I'm kinda fed up with Grumpy. His hunter was way more powerful than I thought, so I thought about increasing the difficulty of the mobs, but I didn't want to punish the other players either. He also didn't seem interested in any NPCs, never talked to anyone except for the occasional vendor to buy something. But what was worse is he was oozing with the body language of somebody who obviously wasn't tuned in. Occasionally rolling his dice even though there was nothing to roll for, looking at his phone most of the time, occasional sighs and stretches after long moments of pure silence. After one session, I got with him over text and tried to brainstorm a potential side quest for his character, and he said something along the lines of, "Sure, cool," without much feedback at all. Now for the final session. I intended the session to be mostly roleplay and some skill checks, but no combat. They were in a town, so it was time to introduce NPCs, quest givers, and restock. The session had gone on for about 3 hours at this point, and the player wanted to know about the price of an item. I pulled out my book to search for the answer, cue a long wait time. Grumpy was extremely bored, so he did his usual things before leaning forward to grab a dice out of the dice bag we had centered in the table and tossed it at me. I assumed it was to get my attention, and it missed, so I ignored it. The second hit me in my chest, and I was peeved, so I shot him a look, which Grumpy proceeded to smile before tossing a third dice at my face. I responded by grabbing the entire bag of dice and throwing it at him, sending the contents spilling onto the lobby floor. After that, we were on each other, tables and chairs knocked over in the classic college tussle, but with extra dice to boot. Hard to tell which one of us was more messed up by the end of it, but we both got a few good blows in. The players pulled us apart and we cursed at each other before the RA came in. He gave us a warning, he was a fairly nice guy, and had us clean up everything, but before the cleanup I told everyone I was officially done hosting the campaign. Went on a long hiatus after that and didn't touch D&D for like 2 years. I thought I just wasn't cut out for it. Words of wisdom: if you want to fight a player at your table, take the rulebook with you for extra bludgeoning damage. I can't really say I condone the OP's actions because punching your problem player in the face is probably not the best solution to your problems, but hey, I mean, it is a solution. This is the end result of what happens when you let things boil over. Emotions run high, and a little bit of instigating can lead to a full-on fist fight. Up until the fist fight, the story wasn't actually that bad. It's mostly just a difference in playstyle that's causing the friction. But the main issue is that while the DM is trying to resolve that difference in playstyle, our problem player is not. They just don't seem to care, which is a big issue. D&D needs engagement. You need to care. And if you don't care, if you're just on your phone the whole time, and you're not trying to resolve any of these issues, you're not trying to engage with the rest of the players, what is the point of being there at all? Alright, if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, well, let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then we have a campaign diary series where I go over my D&D campaign, Descent into the Veil, and you guys learn some lessons from what happens there. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to see more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Fight Night to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.